My beloved child, there is a quiet reason your heart felt different today, even if you could not explain it. Some moments arrive without making a sound, yet they leave an imprint that refuses to disappear. Last night was one of those moments. A scene unfolded while the world was busy with ordinary things, and although you were not there to witness it, the meaning of it has slowly been making its way toward you. Do not rush away from this feeling. Don't skip. Because what seemed like an ordinary evening carried a conversation that quietly changed the direction of someone's heart in ways they never expected. An unexpected detail deserves your attention. Your soulmate was seen last night, but the story is not as simple as appearances often make it seem. Many people assume that seeing someone beside the person they care about automatically reveals the whole truth. Yet life rarely speaks in complete sentences. Sometimes it whispers in fragments, leaving only those who are patient to understand what really happened. Stay till the end, because the most meaningful part of this story is still waiting to unfold. There was laughter in the air, familiar voices, gentle lights reflecting across the evening, and for a brief moment it looked as though your soulmate had completely forgotten everything that once mattered. Anyone watching from a distance might have reached the wrong conclusion. They were standing beside someone, listening carefully, answering questions with calm expressions, and carrying themselves with unusual composure. It appeared comfortable, almost effortless. But appearances have always been the easiest stories to misunderstand. Then something shifted so quietly that almost no one noticed. A simple question was asked. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of question that slips into a conversation without warning. In that single moment, the expression on your soulmate's face softened in a way they could not hide. The confidence that had surrounded them only seconds earlier faded into thoughtful silence. They looked away for just a heartbeat, as though searching for words they had been carrying for much longer than anyone realized. Why would such an ordinary question create such an extraordinary pause? That is the mystery no one around them understood. While others continued talking, your soulmate seemed to disappear into their own thoughts. It was almost as if they were standing in two different places at once, present with those around them, yet emotionally somewhere else entirely. Something important was quietly moving through their heart, and no one knew the reason. Perhaps this explains why certain connections refuse to fade, even during seasons of distance. Some people can walk into crowded rooms, smile politely, and still carry someone silently within their thoughts. Not because they are trapped by the past, but because certain memories continue to teach the heart what truly matters. Maybe you have felt something similar yourself without ever finding the right words to describe it. Don't skip, because the next piece changes everything you thought you understood. The person standing beside your soulmate was not creating the emotions that appeared on their face. Instead, they unintentionally uncovered feelings that had already been there for much longer. The conversation became less about the present and more about the quiet truths that had never fully disappeared. Every answer your soulmate gave seemed careful, almost protective, as though they were guarding something deeply meaningful from being misunderstood. As the evening slowly came to an end, there was one final exchange that very few people paid attention to. It lasted only a few seconds, yet it lingered long after everyone began walking away. Your soulmate remained unusually quiet afterward. They looked toward the night sky for a moment, took a slow breath, and left carrying thoughts that no one else could hear. Those silent moments often reveal more than the loudest conversations ever could. Something important is waiting for you. Because what was spoken during those final seconds may explain why your soulmate's heart has been changing in ways that even they are only beginning to recognize. But those words, and the surprising reason they could not stop thinking afterward, belong to the next word. The silence that followed carried more meaning than the conversation itself. Most people walked away believing they had witnessed an ordinary evening, but they never noticed that your soulmate remained standing for a few extra moments, as though leaving too quickly would force them to leave an important thought behind. There are times when the heart quietly asks questions that the mind cannot answer, and last night became one of those rare moments. Stay till the end, because what happened next revealed something far more personal than anyone expected. The person beside your soulmate smiled gently before asking one final question. It was simple enough that no one around them gave it a second thought. Is there someone you still think about? The words floated through the air without urgency, yet they landed with unexpected weight. For the first time that evening, your soulmate did not answer immediately. Instead, they looked down for a brief moment, letting the silence speak before any words arrived. That pause was not empty. It was filled with memories that had never completely faded. Sometimes the deepest feelings are not hidden because they are shameful, they are hidden because they are precious. The heart protects what it truly values until the right moment arrives. Those nearby only noticed a thoughtful expression, but beneath that calm exterior, countless emotions were quietly finding their place. Then your soulmate spoke with remarkable honesty. They admitted that some people leave footprints on your heart that never completely disappear. They explained that life may continue moving forward, new conversations may begin, and different faces may come and go, but certain connections continue to shape the way a person sees tomorrow. Their voice remained calm, yet every word carried the quiet weight of someone who had spent a long time reflecting instead of reacting. The person listening seemed surprised. Perhaps they expected a different answer. Perhaps they imagined the story had already ended long ago. Instead, they discovered that your soulmate had been carrying an unfinished chapter within them, a chapter they rarely shared with anyone. It was not spoken dramatically. It was offered with sincerity, the kind that cannot be rehearsed. Don't skip, because this is where the evening quietly turned. Rather than encouraging your soulmate to forget the past, the other person simply nodded and said something unexpected. They said, "Maybe the people we cannot easily forget are the ones who teach us who we truly are." Those words settled into the conversation like gentle rain, leaving everyone strangely quiet for a moment. Your soulmate did not argue. They did not change the subject. Instead, a peaceful smile appeared. The kind that comes when someone feels understood without needing to explain every detail. That expression lasted only seconds, yet it carried the calm of someone who had finally stopped pretending that certain feelings never existed. If you have ever wondered whether meaningful connections can remain alive through quiet seasons, perhaps this moment offers an answer. Not every important story is written with dramatic events. Sometimes it grows through patience, reflection, and small conversations that unexpectedly uncover the truth already resting inside the heart. As the night drew to a close, everyone began saying their goodbyes. Yet before leaving, your soulmate did one small thing that almost no one noticed. They reached into a pocket, looked at something for only a second, smiled softly, and tucked it away again without saying a word. It happened so quickly that it would have been easy to miss. But that tiny moment became the most meaningful part of the entire evening. Something important is waiting for you, because what your soulmate looked at in that quiet second, and why it immediately changed the direction of their thoughts, is a detail that transforms everything you believed about last night. That story begins in the next moment. Few people would have recognized the significance of what happened next. The evening had almost ended, conversations were fading, and the gentle sounds of the night had begun to replace the cheerful voices from earlier. Yet while everyone else was focused on leaving, your soulmate paused one final time. It was not because they had forgotten something. It was because one quiet reminder had unexpectedly found its way back into their heart. The small object they had looked at remained hidden from everyone around them. No one asked about it. No one seemed curious. To the people nearby, it was only a brief glance. But for your soulmate, it carried the weight of a memory that refused to lose its meaning. Sometimes a simple keepsake, a familiar word, or even a small reminder can awaken emotions that have been patiently waiting beneath the surface. Stay till the end, because the next few moments reveal why last night became unforgettable. As they continued walking, the person who had spent much of the evening talking with them gently caught up and smiled. Instead of asking another difficult question, they spoke with quiet kindness. "You seemed somewhere else for a moment," they said. "It felt like your heart was following a different path than your footsteps." Your soulmate did not deny it. Instead, they gave a thoughtful smile that seemed to carry both gratitude and reflection. Sometimes, they replied softly, "There are people who continue to inspire your choices even when they are not standing beside you." It was not a dramatic confession. It was calm, sincere, and impossible to misunderstand. The other person became silent. For the first time that evening, they realized this story was never about replacing anyone or beginning something unexpected. It was about understanding a connection that had quietly remained meaningful through changing seasons. Some bonds become part of who we are. They influence the way we hope, the way we grow, and even the way we see tomorrow. Don't skip. Because something even more meaningful happened before they parted ways. Just before saying goodbye, the other person offered one final observation. "I hope," they said gently, "that whoever you're thinking about someday realizes how deeply they have shaped your life." Those words settled into the silence like a peaceful echo. Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. Instead, they looked toward the quiet horizon, took a slow breath, and allowed a smile to appear. Not the kind people force for photographs, but the kind that arrives naturally when the heart recognizes something true. That smile lasted only a moment. Yet it revealed more than an entire evening of conversation. Sometimes the strongest emotions are not spoken aloud. They appear in the pauses between sentences, in the peaceful expressions that cannot be rehearsed, and in the quiet hope that tomorrow may offer another opportunity to say what has remained unspoken. As they finally walked away, their pace was slower than before. It was as though the evening had given them something valuable to carry home, not answers to every question, but clarity about what truly mattered. And clarity has a remarkable way of changing what comes next. Something important is waiting for you. Because later that same night, after everyone had gone home, your soulmate made one quiet decision while sitting completely alone. A decision connected to someone they could not stop thinking about. That unexpected moment is where the story takes its most meaningful turn, and it begins in the next. The night had grown remarkably quiet by the time your soulmate finally arrived home. The conversations were over, the laughter had faded into memory, and the world outside seemed to slow to a peaceful stillness. Yet inside, their thoughts had only just begun. There are evenings that end the moment you close the door behind you. And then there are evenings that continue long after the lights grow dim. This was one of them. They placed their keys down without thinking, sat in silence, and simply allowed the events of the evening to settle. Nothing felt rushed. Nothing demanded an immediate answer. But one question continued returning with gentle persistence, almost as though it had been waiting patiently to be heard. What am I truly hoping for? Stay till the end, because the answer did not arrive all at once. Your soulmate replayed the conversations from earlier, not searching for mistakes, but searching for meaning. They remembered the smiles, the familiar voices, the unexpected question that had left them speechless, and the quiet realization that followed. It became clear that the most memorable part of the evening was never about who happened to be standing nearby. It was about what those moments uncovered inside their own heart. Sometimes people spend so much time looking ahead that they forget to notice what has quietly remained important all along. A gentle smile crossed their face once again. Not because every uncertainty had disappeared, but because something finally made sense. Don't skip, because this small realization changed everything that followed. Without any hesitation, they reached for a notebook resting on a nearby table. They opened it to a blank page and sat for several moments before writing a single sentence. I don't want to keep pretending this doesn't matter. Those words were not written for anyone else to read. They were simply an honest reflection, one that had taken much longer to acknowledge than anyone would have guessed. As they continued writing, the sentences became more hopeful. They wrote about gratitude, about timing, about the people who quietly shape our lives without always realizing it, and about the strange ways certain connections continue to encourage us to become kinder, wiser, and more patient. It wasn't a letter meant to be sent. It was a reminder to themselves that meaningful feelings do not disappear simply because life becomes busy. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Perhaps you've discovered that the heart has its own quiet rhythm, revealing important truths only when everything else becomes still. The evening that others casually described as being caught with someone had become something entirely different. It had become an evening of reflection. An evening of clarity. An evening that gently redirected the path of someone's heart. Something important is waiting for you. Just before closing the notebook, your soulmate added one final sentence. One they had not planned to write at all. It appeared almost effortlessly, as though it had been waiting beneath every thought from the very beginning. They looked at those final words for a long time, smiled quietly to themselves, and whispered, "Maybe it's finally time." Time for what? That unexpected decision, and the first quiet step they took the very next morning, changes the direction of this story in a way no one saw coming. That journey begins in the next part. Dawn arrived gently, carrying the kind of quiet that often follows a night filled with honest reflection. While most mornings begin like every other, this one felt different to your soulmate. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because something within them had settled into place. There is a unique kind of peace that appears when the heart finally stops running from its own truth, and that peace stayed with them from the very first moment they opened their eyes. They remembered the final words they had written before going to sleep. Maybe it's finally time. Those words no longer felt uncertain. They felt like the beginning of a promise. Don't skip, because what happened next explains why last night's story was never really about who they were seen with. Instead of rushing into the day, your soulmate chose to move slowly. They made a quiet cup of coffee, stood by the window, and watched the morning light spread across the sky. It seemed ordinary, yet every ordinary detail carried unusual meaning. Sometimes the heart needs stillness before it has the courage to take even the smallest step forward. As they stood there, a memory returned unexpectedly. Not a dramatic memory. Not a painful one. Just a simple moment that had once made them smile without realizing how important it would become later. It reminded them that the strongest connections are often built from small, genuine moments rather than grand gestures. That single memory stayed with them all morning. They tried to focus on other things. They answered messages. They organized their schedule. They completed familiar routines. Yet every quiet pause seemed to lead back to the same thought. Some people leave your mind. Others quietly become part of the way you see the world. Stay till the end, because this is where the story begins to reveal its deepest layer. Just before leaving home, your soulmate opened the notebook once more. They read the final page carefully. Then, beneath the sentence they had written the night before, they added another line. When the moment feels right, I won't stay silent anymore. There was no audience. No applause. No dramatic music. Only a calm decision that felt more powerful because it was made in complete silence. Sometimes the greatest turning points happen when no one else is watching. As they closed the notebook, their phone rested nearby. For several seconds, they simply looked at it. Not because they were distracted, but because they were considering something they had been postponing for far too long. Their hand moved toward the screen. Then stopped. A gentle smile appeared. It has to be sincere, they whispered. Not rushed. That single sentence revealed everything. They were no longer wondering if they should express what was in their heart. They were thinking carefully about how to do it with honesty and kindness. Something important is waiting for you. Because only a short time later, your soulmate unexpectedly crossed paths with someone who offered one piece of advice, a simple sentence that gave them the confidence they had been searching for all along. Those words became the final push toward a decision they had quietly carried for much longer than anyone realized, and that remarkable encounter unfolds in the next part. There are moments that seem too ordinary to remember, yet they quietly become the turning point of an entire story. That morning held one of those moments. Your soulmate stepped outside with no expectation that anything unusual would happen. The streets looked familiar, the sky was calm, and the rhythm of the day had already begun. But sometimes the smallest encounter arrives at exactly the right time. A familiar face greeted them with a warm smile. It was someone they had not spoken to in quite a while. The conversation began with simple words, the kind exchanged every day without much thought. Yet as they talked, the subject unexpectedly shifted toward life, timing, and the people who leave lasting impressions on us. Stay till the end, because one quiet sentence changed everything. The other person paused for a moment before saying, "You know, people often wait for the perfect moment." But sometimes the perfect moment is simply the one where you're honest. Those words were not directed at any specific situation. They were offered as gentle wisdom. Yet your soulmate felt as though they had arrived precisely when they were needed. For several seconds, they said nothing. Not because they disagreed, but because something inside them recognized the truth hidden within those simple words. Don't skip, because this was the first time they stopped searching for excuses. As the conversation ended, your soulmate thanked them and continued walking. Their pace was different now, not faster, not slower, just steadier. The uncertainty that had followed them for so long no longer seemed as heavy. It was as if the quiet reflections of the previous night, the words in the notebook, and this unexpected conversation had all become pieces of the same puzzle. Then something surprising happened. Their phone vibrated. It wasn't a message they had been expecting. It wasn't even from the person you might imagine. Yet the notification reminded them of something they had almost forgotten, a photo saved months ago. Without thinking, they opened it. The image itself was simple. Nothing dramatic. Just a small moment captured in time. But it carried a feeling that no photograph could fully explain. They looked at it for longer than they intended. A quiet smile returned. Not because they were living in the past, but because they finally understood why that memory had stayed with them. Some moments are not meant to keep us looking backward. They are meant to remind us what deserves to be carried forward. Something important is waiting for you. Your soulmate locked the phone, took a deep breath, and made a decision they had postponed again and again. This ends today, they said softly. Not the connection. Not the hope. The hesitation. For the first time in a long while, they were ready to stop wondering and start moving with quiet sincerity. But just as they were about to take that first meaningful step, someone unexpectedly called their name from behind. The moment they turned around and saw who it was, everything they had planned paused once again. And that unexpected meeting is where the next part begins. My beloved child, every story reaches a moment when silence has carried its message long enough. This was that moment. Your soulmate slowly turned after hearing their name. Standing a short distance away was someone who had quietly observed more than they had ever revealed. There was no urgency in their expression, no dramatic announcement waiting to be delivered. Instead, they offered a gentle smile that seemed to say, I think you've already found the answer. For a few peaceful moments, neither of them spoke. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations begin with understanding rather than words. Then came a sentence so simple it almost disappeared into the morning air. You've been carrying this in your heart for a long time, haven't you? Your soulmate smiled with quiet honesty. Yes, they answered. Longer than I realized. There was no need to explain every detail. Some truths become clear without endless conversations. The hesitation that had followed them for so long had quietly melted away. What remained was not certainty about the future, but confidence in being genuine. Don't skip, because this is the promise hidden inside the entire journey. The person they met gave one final piece of encouragement. Whatever you choose, let it come from kindness. The right words never need to be rushed. Those few words settled gently into your soulmate's heart. They thanked them, continued walking, and for the first time in a long while, every step felt lighter than the one before. Last night was never truly about being caught with someone. It was never about secrets, assumptions, or appearances. It was about discovering that a quiet conversation, an unexpected question, and a few honest moments could help someone understand what had been resting in their heart all along. Sometimes life places people in unexpected situations not to confuse them, but to help them see themselves more clearly. Perhaps that is why this story found you today. Perhaps it is a reminder that the deepest connections are not measured by noise or constant attention. They are often strengthened by reflection, patience, and the courage to be authentic when the right moment arrives. Something important was waiting for you from the very beginning. Not a shocking revelation. Not a hidden mystery. But a gentle truth. Real connections are built when hearts choose sincerity over uncertainty, hope over hesitation, and kindness over fear. As your soulmate walked toward the rest of the day, they carried no grand performance, no perfect script, and no guarantee of what tomorrow would bring. They carried something even more valuable. A peaceful heart. A clear intention. And the quiet courage to let the next chapter unfold naturally. And perhaps that is the most beautiful ending of all. Because sometimes the greatest surprise is not who someone was with. It is discovering who they have quietly become.